Welcome to the New England Real Estate Journal radio show. I'm Rick Kaplan with Eric Wilson, and we have with us today is Dan Perruzzi of Margulies Perruzzi Architects.
How long has Margulies Perruzzi Architects been in business, and a little history for our viewers?
Sure. We've been in practice for 27 years, over 27 years. The firm is about 45 people now. It's actually about the largest that we've been in our history. The market is very strong, so we're responding well to that. We do primarily corporate design, architecture, and interior design for a wide range of corporate clients. We have clients who are in the corporate and professional services sectors. We do a lot of work with developers on core and shell work, new buildings out of the ground, as well as rehabs. And we do a lot of work in the R&D and healthcare fields as well.
Okay.
Dan, can you break down the difference between the exterior and interior of architect? Because obviously you take a building like what you're in today. Now this was an old building.
Right.
Now when you look at a space like this, when you see all the brick and all that, do you have to work around that, or are you looking at scrapping the whole thing and starting fresh?
No, with a building like this, you're trying to preserve the character as much as possible, and you're really trying to enhance the character. So if you walk through our office, you would see that we really made use of all of that existing brick. We made use of the existing wood structure and columns. So that really lends a warmth and an integrity to the space. So we try to work with that as much as possible. You know, lots of times you'll be working within, say, a high-rise building it's steel, it's concrete slabs. There's not an awful lot of character, so you have to insert the character into that space. But when you're faced with a challenge like this, you try to work with what you're given and enhance it as much as you can.
Now, what about building codes and things of that nature? When you run into a building that's, I don't know how old this building is, but it's probably at least 80, 100 years old?
It's probably more than that. A lot of these buildings were built in the late 1800s, early 1900s. This was a Boston Wharf Company building, and this specific building was actually a wool warehouse. So ships would pull up into the channel and unload wool, and it would get carted off to wherever. And when the building was empty, you can actually see outside the building there are pipes that protrude from the exterior wall. They would go in and wash the inside of the building down because it was full of lanolin and waste, and that would get flushed out to the channel because at the time the channel was just a big sewage channel.
Right.
So thank God that changed.
Thank God that changed. Yeah.
How about now? Do you only service the Boston area? Are you New England, or are you national?
I would say 90% of our work is within 495.
Okay.
We work some outside that, but most of it is within 495. A lot of downtown work, a lot of western suburb, northern suburb work. We have occasionally done projects outside the state for ongoing clients. Mm-hmm. So, for example, a client that we're doing work in the Boston area for may have a southern New Hampshire office. We'll do that project for them. And we've done work with existing clients who have a branch office, say, in San Jose, and we'll do some initial design studies for that. But as a rule, we don't go outside the New England area.
Right.
And if we do go outside the New England area, we've got a procedure in place for how we do that, rather than try to provide full services, which for a firm our size is difficult to do.
Okay.
Now, when you're designing a building, and because you seem to know a lot of history about this particular building, but when you
Are you saying something about my age, Rick?
I'm saying you look
You're
sound look pretty young, and you look even better than that.
Oh, wow.
No, but when you're looking at an area, Eric doesn't like to see it. He hates when I do stuff
I got lost there for a second.
No, but when you look at an area, and you know a little bit about the history, do you take that in consideration when you're looking at your design?
Yeah, I think absolutely you do. Architects are always trying to understand the context that they're working on. Now, that has a lot more to do with when you're designing a building as opposed to designing an interior space. But in some ways, the exercise is the same. When you're working in an interior space, like I said before, you're trying to understand what the essential nature of the space is, and you're trying to enhance that. You're trying to really bring it out. When you're designing a building, it's important for you to understand the context, and it's important for you to understand history, and it's important for you to understand how to respect those things and how to work with them. Architects learned lots of lessons from the 60s and 70s when we did buildings that really wanted to sort of stand alone on their own and just ignore everyone around them, and those weren't that successful.
So you take a lot of things into consideration when you take on a site or a project.
Absolutely.
As well as, obviously, the client. They
Sure.
have to have some say in it as well, I'm sure.
They absolutely do, of course.
They're writing the check.
They absolutely do.
But, I find it amazing that you can take all of those components and then put together a whole project.
Well, I think that's actually the essential nature of design. You take a lot of input from a lot of different things. Your client, what the program is all about. What are we trying to achieve? Office space, medical space. What does the site tell you? What do the climate conditions tell you? What are you trying to achieve in the way of energy and sustainability? All of those factors come together, and it's really a wonderful process, and it's the thing that architects and designers are really trained to do. It's to look at a whole range of criteria, and out of that begin to sort out a solution that answers as many of those things as you possibly can.
Here's a weird question. I know this is way out of left field because we're talking about taking in like the whole neighborhood to do design. What about with the new mobile workforce? Do you see the market for office space declining, staying same, or is it going to expand?
I think in general what you will find over time is that the square footage required per person is going to shrink. And it's going to happen steadily. And it will continue to happen steadily. We're seeing it now already. Office design is really responding to a lot of things, and mobile workers are one of them. So a lot of organizations that we work with are a little bit more traditional. People are in their office 9 to 5 all day. Another sector has groups of people who are in and out of the office on a regular basis. Fewer people are actually there. And then there's a whole other set of clients who really want their workforce to be not just mobile outside the office, they want them to be able to work mobile within the office. So that means no one's got an assigned seat. Mm-hmm. Maybe one day you're sitting at a small table in the break room, and that's where you're working. You have your laptop, you're signed in on Wi-Fi. The next day you might be at a stand-up desk. The next day after that you might be in a small private room because you've got to do a lot of heads-down concentration work. The demographics of the office are changing. The newer generation has a different view of what work is about. They don't draw a sharp line between, okay, I'm at work now or I'm not at work.
Right.
They're working all the time. They're organizing their lives all the time. So you have to accommodate for that, and you have to make that kind of work methodology welcome. And that's a lot of what office design is about these days.
Right.
It's about understanding what are the demographics, what are they looking for in the way of workspace that's different than mom and dad's old model of a desk and a chair, and that's where I sit.
Right.
And we'll be right back with Dan from MPA. And we're back on New England Real Estate Journal Radio. I'm Rick Kaplan with Eric Wilson, and we're talking with Dan Perruzzi of MPA. And we were talking a little bit before about some of the interior architecture that you were working on, and some of the buildings that you take some of the history. Now things are changing a little with open space. How is that affecting the designs in a lot of your projects?
Well, it's actually, for firms like ours that design interior space, it's a really exciting time because there's lots of really interesting stuff out there. And firms are really and truly looking hard at their office space to try to figure out how to optimize it. Most every firm that I'm working with, they're looking at their demographics, they're looking at their changing workforce, and they're trying to design space that really accommodates for that. So, like I said before, the days of, we're going to have some private offices and we're going to have some open cubicles, those days are actually gone because there are so many different categories of workers. There are people who want private offices. There are people who want to collaborate with team members. There are people who are in and out of the office on a regular basis. There are consultants. There are people who are not really assigned to the office but need to be there on a fairly regular basis. So you really have to understand what that census is all about. And for architects like ourselves, you really have to understand what the workflow is like. What's the nature of their work? We've worked with a lot of organizations who may be sitting in an old office model, the private office and workstation model. And when we talk to them about the way they actually work, and when we talk to their people about how they actually work, invariably we discover that there are things that are missing from their workspace that could make their daily lives better, more productive, if they had them. So the common issue is we just don't have enough collaboration space. And collaboration is an overused term, but everybody works in teams these days. And so your ability to leverage that team effort is really critical. I'll walk through an office space, and my client will point to me, well, there's our collaboration space, and there's another one over there. But it's funny, they never get used. They never get used because they're poorly designed. They're poorly positioned within the office. They're not properly set up with technology. So there's a whole series of things missing that means no one would ever use them.
So there's quite a bit of research that goes into doing that interior design.
Absolutely. Tremendous amount of research into what the nature of the organization is, and a lot of research and almost psychoanalysis, if you will, to try to get them to talk to you about what they want to be, not just what they are today, but what they want to be in the future. So one tool that we use is we'll send out a survey with a series of questions. It goes out to everybody in the organization. It's over the web. It's completely anonymous. But at the end of it, we can tally up responses and we can identify trends. So if we ask you, do you have enough meeting space? Is it the right kind of meeting space? Is it properly equipped? You start to get a sense from those answers which direction you ought to go in with the new space, what kinds of things you ought to correct for.
What about, what about space that's shared by two different companies, like co-op space? Do you have to take into both companies' workforce and how they're going to use that in order to make sure the office fits both companies' needs?
Well, so co-op space is a little bit different because the way I think about it is it's almost sort of a model where multiple companies, not just two, might be coming in to utilize the space. And so then what you're doing is you're creating common spaces that everyone can use that provide a little bit of energy to the space, meeting spaces, and then private workspaces. And then that's in a lot of ways an entirely different thing, which, by the way, is growing in popularity.
Right, exactly. I see it all over Cambridge right now.
Definitely. Those are more, I think of those more as incubators.
Okay.
That's where a company gets its initial startup.
Okay.
And then once they become more mature, they're going to look for their own space that's personalized to them. The space that they're in now may work perfectly well for where they are today, but every company has their own aspirations. They want to establish their own identity. So
Right.
we work with them to try to figure that out too.
Okay.
Now, Dan, on some of the completed projects that you have worked on, can you tell us a little bit about some of those, or some of the highlights of some of those projects?
Sure. We recently completed a project for CDM Smith. CDM is a large engineering and construction firm. They're headquartered right here in Boston. A year ago this time, they came to me. They were in Cambridge. They wanted to move to Boston. They had a new location picked out. Unfortunately, they had a very tight time frame, and they had a requirement from their existing landlord to be out of their space by March 1 of 2015. And we were talking at the end of July 2014. So
That is a tight
window.
it is. So it was 120,000 square feet, 7 floors of fit up at this new building.
Wow.
So we had to design it and get it constructed in that time frame.
A lot of late hours.
Late hours, but it was also a lot of smart work on the part of the contractor, the client, and ourselves, where we really thought about what are the right choices, what are the right design choices to be made. So a really simple one was we went with a prefabricated wall system. So normally in an office like that, you would build the walls in place. You erect studs, you put gypboard on each side, you tape that, you paint it, and off you go. What we did was we went with a prefabricated system where all that partitioning was built at a factory someplace else, came in pieces, and really modules about 5 feet wide. What that allowed us to do is we were able to continue designing while the walls were being fabricated someplace else. And so construction started before those walls were 100% complete. They put down carpet, they put up the ceiling, and then one day the walls show up and they get put into place. That saved months off the construction
So
schedule.
it's like a box that you created? And
Well, it's actually components, believe it or not. It's individual panel components that get slapped together. So each office is composed of multiple components. The great thing about it is you're building those walls under controlled conditions. There's less waste. It's better for the environment. And for us, there was a big schedule
made
impact.
it a lot easier to get that time frame done.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, but obviously, they're not all like that. You probably have some time, more time than you had on that project.
We do.
Have you had any other projects? Now, you also work on the exterior.
That's right.
As well as the interior.
That's right.
So have you had anything that you designed that has, from the ground up?
Oh, absolutely. Right now we're wrapping up a building in Waltham, 275 Wyman Street. It'll be almost totally occupied by Vistaprint, and our client was Hobbs Brook Management. They're a real estate company.
Oh, yeah.
And
They've been a guest on our show.
They have, and I know that they have been our client for a number of years. And 275 Wyman is a little over 300,000 square feet. It'll be a sustainable designed building. Vistaprint, as I said, is moving into it, and that's for us. That's a major project. That's one of our major architecture projects that's ongoing now.
So that's a project that you have started from the ground up.
That's right.
Out exterior and interior.
Correct. So, in a lot of cases, we will design shell and core, the exterior and the core interior of the building. If we're lucky enough, we'll also get a chance to do the interior fit-up, and in this case, we did both, which is really gratifying to be able to do all of those things.
Oh, so it's a showplace for your company.
Absolutely.
You've talked in some serious big numbers in square footage, 300,000 and 275 Wyman, 125,000. Is there a minimum you do that you wouldn't take a project that has less than a certain amount of square feet, or is there a maximum you wouldn't do more than?
There's not a maximum. There is absolutely not a maximum. There's a minimum that we would be useful at.
Okay.
Let's put it that way. As a project gets smaller, it's more and more difficult for us to be profitable at a fee that would work for that individual client.
Okay.
When we get to around 10,000 square feet, I get very skittish. And truth be told, I'd rather be north of 15, maybe 20,000 square feet. Okay. We do work within the 15 to 20,000 square foot range, no question about it. But it's we're a premium service company.
Right.
There are lots of other organizations smaller than us that would be able to do that for less money, but not nearly as well as we do. But that client may not need the level of design that we provide.
Okay. Solid.
Are there a lot of the architect firms that would do exterior and interior?
Sure. There's a tremendous amount of competition in this region. There's any number of firms that we compete with on a regular basis, and any number of firms who can do that kind of work. No question about it. And so it's important for a firm like us to try to find a way to separate ourselves from them.
Well, this is one way.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're hoping.
But so this is almost like a one-stop shop. In other words, that they come here and they wanted someone to design the whole project.
Yes.
They don't have to go out, one architect for the exterior, one for the interior, any of the other. Now, when it gets to at what point do you start working with the developer and the contractors? Right from the start?
Well, we actually tell clients all the time that the best approach is to have a contractor involved at the early stages of a project, because the contractors we work with are exceptionally good at being able to look at design documents that aren't 100% complete and give a good close estimate on what the overall construction cost will be. We can do the same, but it's not nearly as accurate, and the contractors are doing this work all the time, so they've absolutely got their finger on the pulse of what the market is doing. And these days, the labor market is extremely tight, so that has a direct impact on how much it costs to construct things. So we tell clients all the time, as part of the design team, we really recommend that you have a general contractor who can comment on cost and can also comment on things like constructability and schedule issues. The issue that I talked about with CDM Smith, the prefabricated walls, that was worked out between ourselves, the owner, and a contractor. We all worked together in concert to really come up with that idea.
What about using like, USGBC's LEED certification? Would that be being pretty much all new buildings have to have some kind of, status, whether it be platinum, silver, or gold? Do you take those things in consideration? Natural lighting, the sound, and also the actual employees that are actually going to sit in these offices and their, what do you say?
Well-being.
Well-being, yes,
Right,
because
right.
of whether it be sound or interruption from another desk that's too close, things like that. Do you have to take
Sure.
all that into consideration, minus all the research we've already talked about?
Oh, you absolutely do. Sustainability is a big thing these days, and it's in some ways it's an important factor for employees to make a decision on where they want to work.
Right.
So Company A is in a sustainably designed space. Company B is not. They're both offering the same package in terms of compensation and benefits and challenge and so forth. An employee today is going to tend towards the company that is in sustainable space. So we talk with our clients a lot about that, about how to design sustainable environments. We've designed over 2 million square feet of LEED certified space, so we understand that program
Nice.
extremely well. Today we find a lot of clients are a little iffy on paying the money that it takes to actually certify the project.
Right.
There is definitely cost to doing that. But we talk all the time about making good material and system choices that would get you to LEED certification, and then LEED certification is really up to you. If you want to go ahead and do that, we're certainly there to help you do it. But literally everything that we do today has a degree of sustainability to it. And a lot of it, frankly, is because building codes have matured to the point that they actually incorporate those aspects.
Right.
So if you did nothing but meet code in Massachusetts, you could probably get the lowest level of LEED certification.
Nice.
Well, Dan, I want to thank you for coming on the show. A lot
And
of
enlightening
interest-
us.
Yes, a lot of interesting or insight on what goes on in the architectural field.
Happy to do it.
That's Dan Perruzzi, principal at Margulies Perruzzi Architects.